She asked you, has Minister Blair hit you up for a letter of support for the Emergencies Act? And you said he has not, and should I expect to hear from him? I find it odd, don't you, that after the fact we have a minister of the Crown seeking support from the police who they've been saying all along was supportive of this?
So I certainly did not receive any inquiries from Minister Blair for any letter to support the invocation of the emergency.
Because you made it clear earlier in your testimony and at the commission that you didn't ask for the invocation.
I did not, and post invocation, I did not receive any requests from any ministers or anyone from federal government to provide any sort of endorsement or letter.
Motz is completely stunned by these answers. Not one of you requested the Emergency Act. Looks like Minister Bill Blair was looking to cover this one up as well. Here's the clip.
I'm intrigued by your belief that the Emergencies Act dealt with four main key areas, and I'll get to those in a minute. Now, as I understand it, Chief, you had an operational plan in place, yes?
That is correct.
And that operational plan was in place in advance of the Emergencies Act being invoked? So
I'm going to need to turn that over to Deputy Ferguson.
Just yes or no, but I mean, you had an Emergencies Act. Are you had an operational plan that was in place prior to the invocation? That's correct. We had an operational plan that we were continuing to build on that was executed after the Emergencies Act. And as I take it, and when you do an operational plan like that, like I said, it's a moving target. It's flexible. You have to adjust. Which you've done that. Were you confident prior to the invocation of the Emergencies Act that the plan that you had developed was going to be successful in moving the protesters? So again, I'm going to turn that over to Deputy Chief Ferguson for response. Just a basic yes or no is fine.
Yes.
So thank you.
We were confident.
So you were confident that that operational plan would certainly work. Now, do you believe, Chief Bell, that you had the support and confidence of the Government of Canada in that plan and through the protests? So I think to execute the plan, I absolutely believe we had the support and confidence, at least of the branches of government we were dealing with. We were integrated with the RCMP and the OPP at that time, and I do absolutely believe we had the confidence. Okay. So did you ever ask the federal government whether they were meeting or going to meet with the protest leaders? No, that wouldn't have been a question I directly asked. Would you, in your experience, would you believe that it would be normal for individuals who have a disagreement like this over whatever it might be, in this case a political disagreement or a mandate disagreement, and they were seeking to have a conversation with government? Do you think it would be beneficial for that to have occurred between government officials and protest leaders? So I do know that we were actively engaged through our PLT groups in negotiating and having discussions. In terms of what asks were directly made or what responses were made from the federal government, I can't comment on that. I'm not asking that, Chief. What I'm saying is, do you believe that in normal course of human interaction, actually having interaction rather than calling people names and dividing Canadians on an issue, just to listen and hear them, would that have been beneficial in a circumstance like this? So as police leaders, we try and negotiate all the time. So whether it was beneficial or not, I can't speak on either party. But that's the key. Human nature is pretty basic, isn't it? People like to be heard, and I would certainly support that. Now, you didn't ask the government of Canada to invoke the Emergencies Act, did you? No, we never made a direct request for the invocation of the act. You had indicated previously that tonight in your testimony that the Emergencies Act helped you to develop an exclusion zone, and yet you've previously stated that other statutory or common law authorities exist that might have authorized the creation of that exclusion zone without the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Do you still believe that? So yeah, what I think I've stated in the past is that the Emergencies Act gave us a very
stable legal framework in order to create an exclusionary zone that did not put all of the onus on an individualized basis to the officers on the front line to make a determination of whether someone could enter an area or not. The act was
Fair enough.
extremely beneficial.
Fair enough, Chief, and I'm sorry, but I mean, we all know that you can set up an exclusionary zone anywhere. We do it at crime scenes all the time. There was a fence around Parliament Hill. You could, without the authorities of the Emergencies Act, you can set up an exclusionary zone, and we all know you can. But anyway, my time is up. Chief, I just want to take you back to a comment you had made about the exclusion zone and how the act, the Emergencies Act, was the only, the only tool you had to invoke that, and yet a mere 3 hours after the Emergencies Act was rescinded by the government, the Ottawa Police Service found other authorizations to bar people from the downtown because you put out a bulletin for public safety interests that you are keeping an area that used to be known as the secure area downtown was no longer accessible to the public. So I just wanted to ensure that and remind you that there are other authorities that you could have used for exclusion zones. Now, you had indicated, sir, that you had a plan, you had an ops plan in place, and that you required, and I think Deputy Ferguson said the same thing, that you required manpower, you required resources. When did the Ottawa Police Service ask for those resources? And yeah, I know that Chief Slowly probably asked for them early on, but you would know that. And who did you ask?
So to start to the first part, I don't believe I ever stated that it was the only tool. What I said was it created a very stable legal framework for us to be able to enact.
Right. Yeah, I remember what you said. What I'm saying is that I'm on point with another issue. You invoked another authority to keep people out of the downtown a mere 3 hours afterwards. That's irrevocable. But so how many officers did you ask for? When did you ask for them? And who did you ask for them?
So I'm going to turn that over to Deputy Chief Ferguson.
So thank you. For the first weekend, we had a number of public order units that were here in town assisting us. And then beyond that was on an ongoing basis, there was a very public request for 1,800 officers that I think you saw our chief declare at the Police Service Board meeting.
Right. So the impression that's left is that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was necessary to swear in these individuals. We all know in circumstances like you were facing as a police service, you could have had 500 officers in a room and you could have sworn them in all at once. So I mean, the Emergencies Act was not necessary. Other agencies have done that in the past. So, Chief, I wanted to ask you. Now, we were led to believe that in the early stages, especially during a majority of the blockade here in downtown, the protest, that there was less crime in the affected blockaded area than you're normally used to. Is that? I mean, in fact, significantly less crime. Is there any truth to that? Yes or no?
So I would like to go back to the comment that was made around the swearing in.
Well, I asked the question, yes or no, is there more or less crime in the downtown core during the area where the blockade was?
So I don't have the actual statistics for you, but I can provide those for you.
But you know there's less crime?
No, I do not know there was less crime.
Okay. Well, it was reported widely that there was a lot less crime in the downtown area. Now, given your experience, Chief, you know that there are extremists who would attach themselves to protests to leverage that protest for their own nefarious purpose. Is that correct?
That it can happen and is correct, yes.
Right. And there's some evidence to suggest that, not some evidence, in fact, there is significant evidence to suggest that that's exactly what happened at Coots, confirmed by the RCMP, and also the potential here in Ottawa. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with with the information around Coots. I can tell you there were fringe elements involved in the protests in Ottawa, but I can also tell you there was a large number of people involved in occupying our streets engaged in illegal activities.
Commissioner, you've probably heard over the last significant period of time the distrust that the Canadian public has in Minister Blair and his perceived interference in the Nova Scotia mass shooting. And on the heels of that, if you will, we find a text from Commissioner Lucky to you on around February 22nd, just before the Emergencies Act or after the Emergencies Act was about to be done. She asked you, has Minister Blair hit you up for a letter of support for the Emergencies Act? And you said he has not, and should I expect to hear from him? I find it odd, don't you, that after the fact, we have a minister of the Crown seeking support from the police who they've been saying all along was supportive of this?
I certainly did not receive any inquiries from Minister Blair for any letter to support the invocation of the emergency.
Because you made it clear earlier in your testimony and at the commission that you didn't ask for the invocation.
I did not, and
Right.
post invocation, I did not receive any requests from any ministers or anyone from federal government to provide any sort of endorsement or letter.
So I'm going to take you back to some questioning from my colleague, Mr. Green, in regards to intelligence.
Yes.
And you used the word strategic intelligence. You do know that the threshold for the government's invocation of this, and that's not your responsibility, but the threats to national security. You came out on February 6th or 7th that indicated that I believe this is a national security threat. I don't know what happened on that day or those days that would have caused you to believe that, and I'm hopeful you will tell us that if you can. But that, it flies in the face of what Superintendent Morris has told the inquiry, that there is no credible intelligence to support the threat of a national security threat. And it's just like when you look at how the Act is written. Threats to the security of Canada has the meaning assigned under Section 2 of the CSIS Act. Mm-hmm. And did you see or were you aware of any intelligence that supported espionage or sabotage that is against Canada or detrimental to the interests of Canada?
So I just need to correct your one statement, sir. It was not I that on or about the 6th of February made any sort of declaration or statement about a threat to national security. It was on the 7th of February contained in a Hendon report, a possible threat to national security.
And you referred to that?
I referred to that. And that report is completed and approved by Superintendent Pat Morris. So
Right.
he would have had the same information
And yet,
at that date.
since then, he's said that there is no credible threat. That there was no credible threat to national security. He said that at the commission. So
He did. And again, a point of clarification. So that doesn't dismiss what was contained in
No,
the
I'm
Hendon
not-
report on the 7th. But as time went on, there was no credible threat determined. There was no threat
Right.
that became realized.
So you saw no. Again, to answer my question, you saw no evidence in the Hendon report or any other intelligence reports to suggest that there is any sabotage or espionage against the government of Canada or against Canada, period.
I did not assess that information in
But you didn't see
relation
any of
to the
those threats.
CSIS Act.
But you didn't see any threats that would meet that criteria, did you? In any of the reports?
I didn't weigh it against any criteria. I viewed that information, as I've indicated, as strategic
Right.
intelligence,
Okay, so-
a possible threat to
But
national
now
security.
you have hindsight, sir. You have hindsight. At the time, you still had to consider. So my question is, I'm just going through what the CSIS Act says is the security requirements to be a national threat.
Yes.
Did you see in those strategic assessments that there was a threat to espionage or sabotage to Canada?
You're asking me to look back at all the Hendon reports and did
No, I'm
I
asking
see
you,
that?
were you aware of it? Obviously, you either know you were or you weren't.
Yeah, I didn't see anything specific to sabotage or espionage.
Right. So were you aware of any foreign influenced activities within or related to Canada that would be detrimental to the interests of Canada?
There was reference to such things that needed further investigation, yes.
But nothing was confirmed. It was intel at the time.
Not to my
Raw
knowledge.
intel. Okay.
And I think we need to be clear on mandates here. So strategic intelligence that the OPP is providing is for our decision-making and our planning. That information is disseminated to CSIS, who is responsible for assessing it under the CSIS Act. That is not the responsibility as me of the Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police or the Ontario Provincial Police in general, nor do we have any assessment as to whether it meets the threshold of the Emergency Act.
Mr. Motz, I apologize, but your time is up.